The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 3 hours, for the next 3 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 11 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network and our growing family of terrestrial radio stations, internet relay systems, and satellite programming providers around the world. If you'd like to send us an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or if you'd like to contact me right here in the studio at xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, we are X Zone at xzoneradiotv.com. And let me see, our website, xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, I made a mistake there, X Zone Nation. They were making an adjustment. It's X Zone Radio TV. That plain, that simple. We also have a brand new Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/X Zone Radio TV. You heard a promo for A Different Perspective with our good friend Kevin Randall, which is airing on our network this coming Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, which is 3 p.m. Pacific. Now, Kevin's show is going to be Saturday nights and Sunday nights. But what we are going to do for you in segment number 2 is we are giving you a worldwide premiere of Kevin Randall in his brand new show that is produced by the X Zone Broadcast Network. His guest tonight on his very first show is Jerome Clark. That's in hour number 2 here in the X Zone. My first guest tonight, though, is Carl Johan Calleman. And Carl is a scientist, a philosopher born in Stockholm, Sweden, who is recognized as the main proponent of the idea that the Mayan calendar describes the evolution of consciousness and the resulting inner changes in human beings. Now, he has collaborated with Mayan elders and have helped spread their word and their message and lectured worldwide on the topic of the Mayan calendar. His first 3 books, inspired by the Mayan calendar, have been translated to a total of 14 languages. His background is, however, in hard sciences, where he has a Ph.D. in physical body from the University of Stockholm. Articles he has written have been extensively quoted in scientific literature, and among other places he has been invited to lecture include MIT, Cornell, and the Chinese Academy of Preventive Medicine. It's our great pleasure to have Carl Johan Calleman with us tonight here in the X Zone. And Carl, welcome, my friend, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rob. I'm looking forward to this.
As I am too, my friend. December the 21st, 2012, I was on air for 30 hours straight, just to make sure that if anything happened, we would cover it first. I also spent a week or 10 days with my beautiful wife in Mayan, Mexico, talking to elders about the Mayan calendar. And what I found very strange was, when asked, geez, is the world really coming to an end at the end of the Mayan calendar? We would get looks as if we had 14 eyes, 22 teeth, and green hair. And I think it all boiled down to this when we spoke to one of the members of the royal Mayan family, where he said, Rob, let me put it to you in a way that I don't think anyone else has ever done. I said, okay, here comes something really impressive. He said, now, New Year's Eve, even we here in Mexico, take down the calendar from, in this case, 2012, and we're going to be putting up the calendar for 2013. And I said, yes. He said, that's all there is to it. We are just going from one calendar to the next. So why do you think that there was so much hype about the end of the world coming, Carl?
Yeah, well, it is an interesting story. Why was that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there even came this disaster movie called 2012, which what's about how the world would come to an end and so forth. And the fact is that there is no Mayan source that talks about the end of the Mayan calendar associated with the end of the world.
Yeah.
And there are no Mayan elders living today who would assert such a thing either. So it's something that was completely made up. And you may wonder, why was it made up? And I think, it's just a lot of people seems to have been wired that way, that the Maya gave a date, and then the only way they could interpret it is that this must be the end of the world. But the truth is, there is absolutely nothing in the Mayan sources that implies that would be the case. But I should say, I also very much disagree with the person you talked down there who implies that this is just another sort of timekeeping calendar as all the others.
Right.
He may not have studied in depth the Mayan calendar, because to begin with, the Mayan elders in Guatemala, especially where the tradition is most upheld, they will always study the daily energies and always say that the daily energies of the days that they have different qualities, and people born in different days turn out to have different properties and qualities and destinies and so forth. So most Mayan elders, at least not those that you would qualify as shamans or daykeepers, they would not agree with the person you met there who said that this means nothing, basically. And to me, it's also the Mayan calendar is something fundamentally different from the calendars that the world knows from other parts of the world.
Well, from what you're saying, it sounds as if the Mayan calendar is another astrological divination method.
It is very much a divination method, but it's different from divination in the astrological sense that we used to, in two different ways. First of all, the calendar is not based on astronomy. It's not based on astronomical cycles. And this is, I think, what a lot of people missed who talked about this Mayan calendar, because if you don't realize that the Mayan calendar stands out in that it is not based on the material, physical reality, then you may miss the whole point of it, because this is not a calendar about the physical reality, like, planets circling like around the sun. That's the physical reality. The Mayan calendar is something that describes shifting energies of times, and they used to have and still do, as I mentioned, different kinds of symbols, numbers, deities, so forth, to associate and to describe these different time periods, because they looked upon time as sort of a process of changing spiritual qualities. And in that regard, the Mayan calendar is different from anything else, as far as I know, on our planet, in that it is a non-astronomically based calendar. Um, the second thing that I want to say, I guess I forgot what I wanted to say, because I think that is such an important point, because those qualities, well, I should say then that the difference into normal astrology, I would say, is that you can really track historical changes very clearly if you compare it to these shifting energies of the Mayan calendar. And at least I have never seen that done so precisely and so accurately done with what we call astrology. But yes, there is a similarity, for instance, in the sense that the date of birth, the energy of birth, is supposed to set the tone for your future life. In that sense, it is similar to astrology as it's practiced in other parts of the world.
Where did your interest in the Mayan calendar and the Central American Maya civilization come from, Carl?
Well, in retrospect, I feel this is sort of somewhat of a mission that I was born with. But then again, it's also a matter, if you're born in Stockholm, Sweden, something has to trigger it and make you realize that this is actually your mission. And I think the crucial point there was when I was 29 years old and went to Mexico and Guatemala, which in those days was a horrific dictatorship, I should also mention, and went there as a backpacker, and took a third-class train from Mexico City down to Merida, which is the capital of the Yucatan Peninsula. And, I could really directly experience that, the closer I would come to this region of the Maya, I just felt more and more home. I felt more and more connected to the people. And I also noticed that they seemed to see something in me that they probably didn't see in most other backpackers, and which made me feel that this is special to me. And then when I actually went to the pyramids and to some of these sites, old temple sites, I felt a strong resonance. And in those days, I could actually sneak into Chichen Itza and to the observatory in Chichen Itza in the middle of the night. You were not supposed to do that, but it was not really a problem because it wasn't that big. There wasn't these huge amounts of people there. But, these kind of experiences to visit these places in the middle of the night and really felt strongly with me. And so I came back from this when I was still a graduate student in toxicology in Sweden. I came back with a deep sense that I had encountered my particular purpose in this life, and which was very happy. I really in many ways, it sort of, even though at the time I didn't really understand what it was that I was supposed to do or the deeper meaning of these calendrical symbols that I had said, but I did sense very profoundly that this is the beginning of something new, and it really was, even though it took some time for it to really bear fruit, but it was a big change.
Carl, based on the years of studying that you have done, and I commend you for the great work that you've done, why do you think
Thank you.
Why do you think the Mayan civilization perished as fast as it did?
Well, I think the first thing is to notice is that, like you did when you were down there, you met some Mayan people, and some people have the idea that they disappeared, which is not correct. I mean, there are millions of people down in that region who speak Mayan languages and would be qualified as Mayans. They definitely you can see them by the way they look, that they are the descendants of the people that created the pyramids 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. But yes, it certainly did disappear. The kind of classical Mayan culture, which is usually talked about as starting around the time of Christ, and then suddenly, quite suddenly, in a number of different city-states, around 800 to 830, they seem to have abandoned these cities. And the way I understand this is that they themselves were the subject of the shifting kind of energies that are driving history at large. In other words, in the main calendar that I'm talking about in the global mind of the rise of civilization is the so-called long count. And that long count started in 3115 BC, and it did come to a change a couple of years ago. But these changes, there was one significant change in 829 in the Christian era. And that's the time when the Maya abandoned their classical pyramid sites. So the way I look upon it is that this long count calendar is actually describing a wave movement of shifting energies. And when there are shifts in this calendar, there will either be a rise of a new civilization, which usually happens then when there is the beginning of a peak in the wave movement.
Right.
But sometimes there are also destructions or disappearance of civilizations. And there are many of these disappearance of civilizations all across the world. And when you start studying it, what you find, I think, is that the shifts, these disappearances, or the rise and fall of civilization coincides very well with these shifting waves that the Mayan calendar describes. And the Maya, they were very interested in how the energies shifted, but their understanding of the shift, I would say, was not complete, or at least they felt the urge to sort of leave these old classical sites and then, at least on the so-called the Yucatan Peninsula, they created what is now called the post-classical civilization around this time of the shift. Mm-hmm. So the old classical disappeared, and instead a new civilization came, which included Chichen Itza and Uxmal and Coba and a couple of other places like that. So it's a wave movement, and they would talk about this wave movement in symbolic terms. They talked about the plumed serpent. To the Maya, it was called Kukulkan, and to the Aztecs, the same deity was called the Quetzalcoatl. And this plumed serpent was really a wave movement. They talked about this plumed serpent as the bringer of civilization, whom, when it disappeared, would also lead to transformations of the civilizations. And we can sort of understand this a little bit from a similar perspective in quantum theory, where there's all these waves that are underlying our physical reality. And what the Mayan calendar is another one of these waves. And what happened with this wave in 829 was that it underwent a shift, and the classical culture disappeared essentially, and a new post-classical civilization emerged in the northern Yucatan Peninsula.
But how come civilizations like Egypt seem to have thrived and was able to, continue with its growth, continue with its sociological advancements throughout the ages to where it is today?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. It's nobody says that the civilizations disappear completely when there is this kind of a shift. Like I said about the Maya, the classical, it sort of had a downturn, and instead they emerged a post-classical. And if you study the old Egyptian history, you will find that also undergoes a number of shifts. It starts with the early dynastic period and the Old Kingdom, and then after what they call an intermediate period, there is the Middle Kingdom, and then there is a second intermediate period, and then there is the New Kingdom, and so forth. And then you can say maybe this old ancient Egyptian civilization, it comes to an end around 500 BC. But it's exactly the same thing. These shifts between Old Kingdom and Intermediate Period, New Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, they also correspond to these wave movements that I was just talking about. They are also Quetzalcoatl or plumed serpent reflections.
Right.
People are in resonance with an underlying quantum field, and that's the reason that civilizations will go up and down in a wave-like fashion.
I see. You and I have to take our break at the bottom of the hour, Carl. Please stand by. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience and your knowledge with us. This is truly fascinating. Exonation, our guest this hour is Carl Johan Calleman, and his website is www.calleman.com. Now, before we get to the break at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to do something that should make a lot of you happy since you asked us to do the horoscopes for you this week. Aries, March 21st to April 20th. Hey, speaking about astrological divination methods, having to deal with a tight budget may have helped you to be more resourceful. Bring your ideas to the right people could lead to a very lucrative contract. Your lucky numbers, Aries, 16, 20, 21, 36, 43, and 44. And somewhere in Hamilton in a Catholic church, none just yelled bingo. For Taurus, April 21st to May 21st, you need to ensure that others know who you are and that your ideas are trustworthy. You might need to take responsibility for your actions and explain a situation. Your lucky numbers are 4, 17, 25, 34, 38, 44. Gemini, May 22nd to June 21st. You may discover a spiritual or health-related profession for yourself in an unusual way. You may be able to learn new ways to make money and help people. Lucky numbers are 13, 18, 19, 37, 42, 46. And let me see, we'll do one more, Craig. Okay, Cancer, June 22 to July 22. Family matters may be emotionally tiring to you. Your positive attitude can enable you to get past the immediate and to deal with tomorrow's issues. Your lucky numbers are 2, 12, 22, 32, 42, and 43. And we will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell, and we'll be back. Don't go away.
Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at www.drgibbswilliams.com.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I kind of really like that bumper music, Craig. Great job. My guest this hour, Exonation, is Carl Johan Calleman, and his website is www.calleman.com. Carl, let me ask you something. Why are there so many commonalities between the myths from all the different civilizations?
Well, it's what I have, I think, verified in this book, The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, is that the evolution of civilization is a product of us downloading a global mind. This relates also a lot to your interest in parapsychology. Because it explains and shows how we are all connected in a way that most people are not aware of. In other words, the global mind is really what is being carried by this wave movement that they used to call the plumed serpent. That's a wave that goes to the core of the earth, and it has a certain lifespan, and as a new wave comes in, we humans, we download this particular mind, a new mind, you might say. So we will all develop in phase with these shifting energies, these shifting peaks and valleys of the wave movement of the plumed serpent, to use the Mayan mythology, so to speak. But that means that at a given point in time, we will, regardless of where we are located and what culture we're part of in different parts of the world, we will download a mind that has significant similarities. And I think the best example is the one that I'm giving in the very beginning of my book, showing, for instance, how the building of pyramids would start at approximately the same time all over the world. Or I shouldn't say all over the world, but we do know a couple of places, like in Egypt, in Mongolia, in Peru, in Mesopotamia, where about 5,000 years ago, when this long count of the Maya began, people started suddenly to build pyramids. And these are people that we have no reason to believe that they were in contact with each other, and yet they started to do the same kind of thing at the same time. And the explanation I'm giving here is that a new form of the global mind at that point became accessible for people to download. And once you download that mind, you will start to create expressions of it outside of yourself, in the external reality. Like what people did 5,000 years ago was that they started to create civilizations, cities, pyramids, calendars, writing, numbers, etc., etc. Those things were all coming at the same time in several different locations. And I attribute that to the downloading of a new mind, a new global mind. And this is something that also, the consequences of this goes much beyond just explaining why civilizations in different parts of the world would arise and to some extent evolve in parallel. Because it also has a lot to do to explain phenomena we talk about as parapsychological, like telepathy or precognitions or premonitions and all these kind of things. Because these things that are referred to usually as parapsychology, they're only strange from a perspective where you believe that the mind is a creation of the brain. And if you believe that the only thing that really exists is the material reality of the brain. And then, of course, it becomes very strange that people can have telepathic contact and all kinds of things we simply know about each other, and all kinds of synchronicities that may mark the course of our lives. That's very strange from that kind of a perspective. But it's not strange at all if you look upon the mind as something that you download from the planet. And because then other people will share the same downloading, and they may fill it a little bit with a somewhat particular content to themselves. But the basic structure of the mind, which is really then the 5,000-year-old mind that we are talking about here, really is something that is a structured mind. It was downloaded through horizontal and vertical lines that would structure the thinking of people. And
all right, so are we are we to say, or can we then take from what you are discussing and how you are giving us examples, that the mind is basically a receiver and a transmitter that keeps us all together from one source, and basically we are, how would I best describe it without getting too way out there? Spiritual puppets?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Our brains are receivers of a mind, and as I have understood this, the Earth is only like a mediator, like a relay of cosmic waves that ultimately come from the center of the universe, which really is sort of a divine source of the whole universe. And this follows a kind of a time plan that makes us, yes, as you say, spiritual puppets. We are very much our ways of thinking and relating to each other, and many other things, like the creation of civilization, is really determined by these waves that we are receiving and then turning into some kind of a reality.
So are we more or less a collective?
Yeah, I would say so. We're a collective. There is a diversity, but the reason I think I should say we all understand, but that at least we understand each other so well, is the fact that our individual brains have not created the mind. Each one of us was walking around here and had a brain that was to create a mind of its own. We will run into a lot of people that we could not understand the slightest of. Now, at least with our contemporary people, we sort of understand where they're coming from, and sometimes we may understand them very, very well. And that's for this reason, as I understand it.
Are we continuing to evolve as a biological species?
I think I skipped that question.
Why?
Why? I think we should be. It's a slow-going process.
Right.
There are 9 waves of creation, and the one I'm talking about, has talked about now, is the one that only goes back 5,000 years. Now, there are other waves in the Mayan calendar system that goes back much, much further, and they have much lower frequencies. But one of them, the bottom wave, so to speak, the first wave, it goes back to the Big Bang.
Right.
And now these are waves that have frequencies, they have periods, you might say, of maybe 100 million years. And so when there is a shift in these waves, there will come up a completely new class of biological organism. So it's quite easy to see in the past that it is exactly these kind of waves emanating from the center of the universe.
Yeah, but I think you've kind of eluded my question. What I asked you, sir, was are we as a species still evolving?
You mean biologically speaking?
Of course, yes.
Yes. Well, I think so, but very slowly.
You think so? What?
Yeah.
What is your hesitation on that point?
Well, it's just that I really haven't seen the evidence for it.
Wait a second. You haven't seen evidence for it? Well, let's take a look at the what has happened in the past in Maya, in Guatemala, and in Mexico, and what has happened in Egypt, and how things have progressed there. You know, I would imagine looking at the past and where we were even 50 years ago to where we are today, I've certainly seen, evolution.
In a biological sense?
Sure.
Okay.
I've seen people who are being more receptive, who look what's going on. Kids, the kids with a greater
yeah,
IQ,
but that's mental.
Well, what's the difference? It's part of biology, isn't it?
No,
it's not.
No, it's not, because the waves that are creating our mind are not biological.
But the mind is found in the biological unit called a human.
The mind is downloaded by the biological human called, the biological species called humans. Yeah. I agree with that. But the mind itself is not biological. It's something. It's like software and hardware. That kind of analogy.
Right.
So like the mind is like the software of the biological species.
All right. So if you are having problems answering me if we are evolving, then there's only one question that leaves me to ask you. Do you believe that we are devolving?
No. I think you're misunderstanding me. There is evolution, but you asked biological evolution, which is there's definitely evolution still going on, and we just passed a shift in 2011, which is very significant. And new evolutionary waves have been activated since the time that this long count was activated. And for this reason, you see a lot of change going on in the world, and these waves are coming into play to change the minds of people. And as the minds are changing, we start to create new phenomena. And more recently, it's been the whole cyber world creation and so forth.
But why are we using the Mayans as a benchmark for the evolution and the progression of society for the rest of the human race. After all, they just kind of petered out after a while. They didn't, they haven't been a leading factor in the continuous evolution of man, not like Egypt.
No, well, the reason is that simply that when you study how history or evolution in its largest sense, going back to the beginning of the universe, to the Big Bang, basically, and all the changes that has happened biologically and spiritually and mentally, all of those things match very, very precisely the Mayan calendar waves. So there is a tremendous amount of evidence that shows that this is the case, and that's the reason it's sometimes possible to make very accurate predictions about what will happen in the future, because this is what lies under the evolution of our physical reality, you might say.
But is this underlying wavelength, this underlying philosophy that you are so that we are talking about when it comes to the Mayans, is the same found in every society? You
mean the same? What is the same?
Well, what it's very simple. You have done a lot of work when it comes to the Mayans. You have.
No, I that's also probably a misunderstanding. My books don't deal very much with the Maya. I mean, I give a chapter to explain what these people was that developed this unique calendar system. They deal with the rest of the world, and especially with our current time and the kind of changes that has been undergoing.
But sir, I can only go by the questions that you supplied to our producer, which is number one is how and when did you become interested in the Mayan calendar? How did your work with the hard sciences prepare you for your present work? When did you get the idea that the Great Pyramid in Giza was built in reflection of a global mind? Once again, number 4, you mentioned the Mayan calendar, and throughout the questions. So one would only assume that your expertise, based on the questions that you supplied us, was the Mayan calendar.
Yeah. It's that's part of it, but it's really much broader than that, because it's like a worldview that is coming out of this calendar.
So, but is that worldview found anywhere else?
No, not really.
Then why is everything so surrounding the intellect of a society that, in all meanings of the word, failed?
Well, all ancient civilizations have failed.
Egypt didn't. Egypt survived, and Egypt grew and prospered.
Well, you can say the same thing about the Maya.
No, I can't, because the Mayans, what happened to their civilization? It basically petered out. They're not the great.
Well, so did they don't build pyramids in Egypt today.
Well, that's because we don't need to build pyramids anymore. We've got the internet, we've got satellites, we've got microwave, we've got everything we need. Technology has advanced along with humanity and society. But when it comes to the Maya, you go down there and they're still backwards.
Yeah, and it's still equally true that if you want to understand the history of humanity, you have to use the Mayan calendar.
Why?
Well, you have to.
Why?
You have to read my books to understand
I'm
that.
sorry, I don't have time to read everybody's book, but you're a guest here on the show, and I'm asking you why we have to use the Mayan calendar.
Because there's nothing else to explain the evolution of human history.
There isn't?
No.
Then tell me why the rest of the world doesn't know that.
Well, I wonder too. For the most part, this is a calendar that has been tremendously misrepresented, as you alluded to initially when you talked. With the only thing people know about it was that it was supposed to come to an end in 2012, the world. Now, that was a lie, so the only thing people know about is a lie. Now, if people don't know about that, it's because they haven't chosen to study it.
Without the Mayan calendar and the publicity that the Mayan calendar has received from tour and travel agencies, the governments of Guatemala, the governments of Mexico, and authors that talk about the Mayan calendars, what would the Mayans be doing right now? Would they have the attention? Would they have the focus that, based on the 2012 end of the Mayan calendar, that they received?
Oh, I think that's almost an unrelated thing, but it's a great culture. The people, it's a very warm and intelligent people, and they people are interested in this culture regardless of these things.
Would you say that the Mayan culture is more interesting and more advanced than the Native American or Native Canadian cultures?
Well, it is a Native American culture. I think that's a very important point to make.
We're talking about the Mayans in Mexico. We're not talking about the Hopi or the Apache or the Huron. American and Canadian Native tribes. Native Americans and Native Canadians. So why isn't the same interest given to these cultures?
You mean the North American?
Yes.
Cultures?
Yes.
Because well, before the arrival of Columbus, there was just one civilization in the Americas that, for instance, had a system of writing.
Wait a sec. Hold on here. I disagree with you, sir, because the Vikings were in North America way before Columbus was, and the Vikings had a way of writing as well.
Yes, but there was no Native American system of writing outside of the Maya. They are the only ones that have that developed that.
And wait a sec. What about the Huron? What about the Iroquois?
They did not have systems of writing.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure. And,
all right, sir. We will send you the what we have found, that they did have a system of writing, even if it's symbology. It's still writing.
Well, maybe so. I've never heard of that. If you send it to me, then I will learn something maybe. Sure. But what I can tell you is that the common view in archaeology is that the Maya had the only system of writing before the arrival of the Europeans, and they also was it was a high culture, very developed in terms of architecture and many other things. And so it was like if you go make the parallel to Europe, you would say that the Maya were like the Greeks of Europe. And so if you want to see the Greek of the Americas, then you would go to the Maya, and that's what has attracted a lot of interest. You can actually read about their histories from their inscriptions and the kind of kings they had, and all these kind of stuff, and that adds to the interest that people have had in the Maya.
So we're talking about marketing, right?
Well, I don't know from what perspective.
Well, like I was saying, before the advent of the publicity buzz around the end of the Mayan calendar, the television commercials that were made about it, even cars were involved in this. I can't remember hearing or seeing a lot of things about the Mayans.
Before that?
Yeah.
No. You might say that to a broader public, the Mayan calendar was unknown until 1987 with a harmonic convergence. That was this gathering, a spiritual gathering in especially in the North America, but in many parts of the world.
Right.
And before that, the Mayan calendar was simply unknown to people, except for the scholars that knew about it, of course, and had elucidated its main traits. So it's a novel thing, and the reason is that it contributes the missing piece of the puzzle if you want a holistic worldview.
A holistic worldview. But
Yeah,
how does that holistic worldview fit in with the actual scientific and archaeological view?
These are different things, I think.
Why?
You said archaeological, and what else?
You said holistic, and holistic.
Yeah.
Holistic isn't recognized by the main.
No, maybe not.
It's classified as fringe.
Right.
But
yes.
But
So
when you put it beside the actuality of history and archaeology, they're so far apart it's not even funny.
Yeah, but that's true for any branch of science, is that it's being compartmentalized, and so the people that study the Maya, they know nothing about Neolithic Europe, or they know nothing about quantum physics, and certainly they don't incorporate these things in a total worldview.
All right,
and
Carl.
That's one way of continuing learning, but it's not what I believe in. What I believe in is that the world now is undergoing.
All right, Carl, you and I have to say so long for tonight. We've just run out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and continued success, mind you. I guess I can honestly say we have a difference of opinion. I'll be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Now, on the other side, we are going to be featuring the very first episode of Kevin Randle's A Different Perspective. This is the X Zone, and you're listening to us on the X Zone Broadcast Network around the world. Don't forget to visit our website, xzoneradio.com, and for all the information on the latest and greatest programming that we're going to be offering you, the members of the X Zone Nation and the worldwide listening audience, visit xzbn.net. I am Rob McConnell.